then we'll start as a few more people filter in. And just one quick reminder while we just are about to start here, if those who are not speaking can ensure they're always on mute for their microphone. When we open up the Q&A, we'll make sure everybody has the ability to unmute themselves too. That's very strange, but the video. Okay, everybody, I think we'll get started now. I'm sure a few more people will filter in as they always do, particularly with the slightly earlier start than normal. My name is Jeff Geipel. I'm with the Monetary Value Initiative of Engineers Without Borders. We work with in partnership with the extractives practice at the World Bank on what's called the extractives-led local economic diversification community of practice, which is intended to bring together the world's stakeholders, practitioners, and resources on the issue of local content and helping extractive industry activity contribute to economic development, but also diversification in host countries. These are a series of webinars that we hold roughly every 2 months or so, diving into topics of great detail in terms of local content. We have a pretty stacked audience in terms of practitioners and experts, so we like to get into a little more detail than the average sort of public-facing webinar. This topic today on gender and local content is one that we've been trying to get going for a number of months, ever since the IFC launched its toolkit on local content and women's participation in the extractive industries last May. We're really thrilled to finally get this going. Also, to have BHP, who has shown some really great leadership on committing to a half female workforce by 2025. And so between these two organizations and their efforts, we thought we could have a really in-depth discussion of there's overlap between local content and women's participation, because both movements have in some ways paralleled each other as developing countries, particularly in Africa, have tried to push for local content over the last decade or so, but at the same time, we've seen a rapid increase in a focus on women's participation in the extractive industry's value chain, perhaps more on the employment side, which of course is what BHP will largely be speaking to, but now more and more also talking about women's entrepreneurship in the context of supplying mining and oil and gas activity. So I don't have a lot more to say than that, and I'd like to give as much time as possible for our speakers. We'll end up with the presentations from the IFC, and then and BHP, and then we'll head to a Q&A period, which I can moderate. These webinars always run 90 minutes. We always end up with more questions than we have time to get to, because the discussion is usually quite good. And people can, while they're waiting, they are able to submit messages for questions via the chat function, and we'll make sure they get answered. And then when the Q&A opens, we'll take them live, but also people can contribute their questions via message if they prefer that. So with that all said, I'm just going to pass it right over to Katie and Adriana at the IFC, who can speak to their work on their toolkit. If you could just share your screen there, Katie.
Yep. Thanks, Jeff. All right. Hold on, let me do the screen share. All right.
There we go.
Is that showing? Okay, great. Well, thanks so much. I'm really excited for this opportunity, and I have to say I'm particularly excited to hear from BHP, because we've been following and very interested in this work for a while, so I'm very excited to hear about that. So thanks for this opportunity. I'm going to talk today. I'm going to start by introducing our new toolkit, which we've just come back from launching the Spanish language version in Peru. And we'll be we'll be printing and presenting a French one in a few months, so stay tuned for that. And then I'll talk a bit about the work that we're doing in the supply chain now. Adriana will give some partner examples. I'm sharing my screen, but it's not letting me advance the slides. Not sure why. There we go. Okay. So I know that many of you are already very familiar with this, but I wanted to just give a sense of how we at IFC are approaching this issue in terms of gender equality in the natural resources. And we are natural resources and infrastructure and natural resources. So often when I'm talking about it, we're looking at it in the context of oil, gas, and mining, but also with an eye towards how does this apply towards infrastructure and natural resources more generally. So, and we recognize that most people who are involved in this work see it as both a development and human rights issue as well as a business issue. But I see this often as we are trying to speak to allies and gender champions within companies and giving them the information that they need to make this case, to take this up the chain and to get some traction within their companies. So we're kind of looking at it always from both sides as the development case, but then how do we make the business case out of that? So we recognize that gender can benefit, in addition to women, of course, can benefit companies, giving companies a competitive advantage, improving profits, productivity. Also, of course, communities, women, the families and communities that are hosts to natural resource projects, and countries. World Bank estimates that countries lose $160 trillion in wealth due to gender gaps. So there's a huge opportunity and potential on all sides for better inclusion of gender issues. And so as the IFC, obviously as the private sector arm, we're looking at this from the business case. What does this mean for companies? And the business case is made up of various components, and we see our entry point in terms of first, human capital, so women as leaders and employees within companies. Then in terms of the supply chain, obviously, so women as suppliers working for and leading supply chain businesses. Women as community stakeholders, so part of the enabling environment that's allowing companies to operate. And we see gender-based violence as a cross-cutting area. So with this in mind, recognizing these as the key entry points for gender, we wanted to create a tool that would allow companies to really concretely take action in each one of these areas to increase representation of women in oil, gas, and mining operations. Again, it's not, there we go. So we've developed a toolkit, the objective of which is to provide companies with tools so they can easily integrate gender into operations, supply chains, and community relations. I realize since I'm sharing the screen, I can't do the handy holding up of the toolkit, which I was planning to do. But the toolkit is, in a nutshell, well, what I would be showing you, if you could see me as well as the screen, is that our toolkit is actually a toolkit. It's a box containing 5 separate publications. And our idea was we wanted something easy for people to take back to their offices, to send out to field offices, and something really accessible. So we divided it into 5 separate publications. One is an introduction and executive summary, and then tool suites on increasing gender diversity from the workforce to the boardroom, one on supply chain and women-owned businesses, one on community engagement, and one on gender-based violence in the workforce. And the idea was that each one of these separate books, we recognize that we don't expect everybody to read this cover to cover, and different business units within any company are going to have different arguments, different business cases, different entry points. So we wanted to create this in such a way that you as a gender champion, for instance, could take this back and give the introduction and executive summary to a CEO. You could give the workforce piece to HR. You could give the supply chain piece to procurement, and community engagement to your community affairs team. So you can get really the targeted information that's most relevant to them. And each one of the tool suites, so each one of these books has an introduction and business case, which is 5 pages. I think the executive summary is 20 pages, and that includes a lot of introductory materials, the acronyms, all that stuff. Within each one, there's a 5-page business case. It's short and sweet. It's full of facts. It's meant to be just a very, very direct, concrete business case. And then tools designed to help companies to assess and prepare. So figure out, where are they now? What do they need to do? What's the kind of state of affairs at the moment? And then tools to address the situation and then monitor and sustain progress. Among the tools, there's some that are super practical for right now: checklists, tools for gender audits. They're already prepared. They're really easy to implement already. There are model policies, so things that can be very easily customized for a company, but really kind of plug and play. And then there are things like terms of reference for areas where we provide guidance notes and let's say guidance, for instance, on assessing gender-based violence within a company. And that's the that we might say, unless you have very specific. Sorry, is it still sharing my screen? Shows me.
No.
No.
Okay, let me try that again. Somehow it just cut out.
Yeah. And by the way, we can't see you on camera as well while you're talking, so you can't hold up your.
Oh, okay, excellent. There you go. Okay, wonderful. That's great. Okay, so see, it's got a handle and everything. It's that handy, and then it's got 5 books, quite short. It's got some visual appeal, we like to think. So there are some things like gender-based violence, for instance, where we would think, unless you have very specialized expertise within a company, it's the kind of thing where it's better to recruit external expertise. So there's terms of reference to provide guidance for companies to bring that expertise in. All right, so going a little bit more in depth into each of the toolkits specifically. So I've got to pull up notes on another computer here because my printer wasn't working. So the first toolkit is on increasing gender diversity from the workforce to the boardroom. Short overview of the business case. I don't want to go too much in depth, but we know that women in leadership roles are good for business. It has a positive effect on operations, financial performance. Diversity improves decision making. PwC found that companies with more women on the board have a higher profit margin. Gender diverse companies are 15% more likely to outperform companies with less diversity, but only 15% of board seats are made up by women. 10% of women, the mining sector is only 10% women. But we have great statistics from BHP, thank you very much, about the rates of improvement tied to gender inclusive operations, and that the 10 most gender inclusive operations have a 15% improvement in performance. I hope I didn't just steal your statistics, but they're so good. So we recognize that in order to achieve these sorts of gains, It has to be about not only hiring women, but getting them into leadership positions, retaining them, promoting them. So whether that's investing in training activities to support women's career development, making sure women can access leadership training activities, developing programs that work not only with women, but with men to change the culture around leadership. We recognize that sometimes these are in cultural contexts where women's leadership is not something everybody is comfortable with. So we recommend working with men as well to try and create an environment where women have opportunities and where they can actually take advantage of those opportunities effectively. So we provide tools in this toolkit on guidelines in terms of reference for gender audits, gender diversity board assessments, a pay gap study, and so how to sort of assess the state of play, and then developing a business case for gender equity, guidelines for reviewing recruitment, setting recruitment targets, hiring or appointing a gender equity champion, and then how to maintain that. In terms of supply chain, and I'll go a little bit more into this after I go through the whole toolkit, but in terms of supply chain, women entrepreneurs are 30% of SME owners in the emerging market, but there's a $1.5 trillion financing gap, which is a third of the total SME financing gap. And as SME owners, women face a whole host of barriers that go just beyond kind of simple procurement issues. But having women-led businesses in the supply chain creates stronger networks, stronger supply networks, higher quality, more competitive prices. And companies that prioritize supplier diversity have 133% greater return on investment, spend 20% less on buying operations, and generally have smaller procurement teams. And as many of you probably know, when you're supporting women-owned businesses, it's not just benefiting the women, but obviously the evidence supports that the more that women make, the more money goes back to communities and empowers families and communities. The third tool suite is on women and community engagement. Women's exclusion from participation in public consultations undermines social license and can really undermine community investment or activities. And social license is one of the top risks to mining operations, mining and oil, gas, and mining operations. So it's really essential that companies are able to bring women into the process and work constructively with them. So we have, I forgot to go through the tools in the supply chain, but I'll come back to that. But in community engagement, we have questionnaires for community engagement, TORs for experts, guidelines for integrating gender into baselines and social impact assessment, guidelines for integrating gender into consultation, guidelines for participatory monitoring, guidelines for integrating gender into resettlement, which we developed in consultation with our team working on the performance standards, we sort of overlapped a bit on supporting development of women's small businesses through community engagement as well as through procurement in the previous toolkit, and sample indicators. And finally, addressing gender-based violence in the workforce. This is an issue that it affects the workforce as well as the communities. Sexual and gender-based violence costs the average Fortune 500 company $6.7 million a year in presenteeism, low productivity, employee turnover. Can have major implications for companies in terms of liabilities, costs of legal fees. We found in Papua New Guinea, in terms of the cost of off-site violence, it was causing employees to miss 11 days of work per year in Papua New Guinea, either taking care of themselves or their partners, meaning lost work time, which was totaling up to 10% of companies' annual wages. And in Australia, gender-based violence is responsible for $1,500 in production-related costs per woman who experiences violence. So it's got a huge cost associated with it. So this tool suite, a lot of the tools are terms of reference and guidelines, where we really recommend bringing in qualified outside expertise, but we also included model policies on sexual harassment and gender-based violence, which have been put in place they were developed in Papua New Guinea by the Business Coalition for Women, including a number of extractive companies. So these are being piloted in PNG already, and they're very sort of ready for use already. So just to give a sense of how we at IFC are using the tools and the support that we've been developing, we are using it for operational support. So we're developing trainings on the toolkits and conducting gender assessments for infrastructure and natural resources for companies, also developing national and regional gender assessments sort of at a community and regional and national level to help inform the engagement with particular companies. We're doing community-focused support, so through our projects, but with a community focus. For instance, participatory monitoring of community activities with a gender focus. We're developing a women's solar entrepreneurship program in natural resource communities in Kenya. We're doing training for men and women as community leaders, technical training, nutritional health trainings in natural resource communities, and working on improving access to finance through the Banking on Women program. And then to complement the operational support, we have research and knowledge products, including this gender toolkit, which we're planning to adapt for energy and transport sectors. And then we're developing short business cases for oil, gas, mining, energy, and transport as well. So drilling down a bit on women as suppliers.
Katie.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If I can interrupt you, I would just want to add that in addition to the services that and the support we are offering to our clients within the INR, we also can tap in the IFC resources on, for example, for access to finance. There are two programs that are led by our colleagues from Financial for FIG. One is related to the Banking for Women, which is basically a support with the banks to deepen their ability to reach women customers through the financial and advisory services, strategic planning, market position, and product repositioning and staff training. And the second one is the IFC Women Entrepreneurship and Leadership Training that basically targets existing women entrepreneurs, and the training, it's helping in building traditional skills, like hard skills, like business development, market segmentation, financial decision, but also it helps building the women's specific activities like self-confidence, presentation, and effective leadership skills. And it offers also coaching and monitoring, and it also monitor how women which are part of the training are developing their own businesses and manage their own businesses and organize like alumni events and network opportunities. We also, the Gender Secretariat is offering also support for employment. We are working in partnership with Edge Strategy to help companies to apply and reach and get the Edge certification, Edge Gender certification. Thank you.
Thanks, Adriana. So drilling down a bit on women as suppliers, I want to talk a little bit about an IFC program that's ongoing right now. The ways to involve women as suppliers obviously would be owners of local SMEs or in leadership positions or positions of power within local SMEs and as employees. But obviously SMEs face a disproportionately large number of challenges. You know, it's not just about access to finance or capacity. It can be things like cultural barriers to participation, collateral, property titles, access to the social networks that would allow them to successfully start businesses, and also from the demand side, the procurement processes and policies, whether those are accessible to smaller firms, which is often where women-owned businesses find themselves in the supply chain. So to overcome these constraints, really need an all-inclusive approach, something that's acknowledging both the supply side factors as well as these demand factors. So in that vein, Canada is undertaking something we're calling the Canada IFC Local Economic Development Program, which is a 5-year program supported by the Government of Canada to strengthen economic and social benefits to communities hosting natural resource projects in Guinea, Ghana, Kenya, and Cote d'Ivoire. So the project is very much aimed at this sort of whole ecosystem approach to supporting local economic development with a huge gender focus. Obviously, being Canadian supported, it's a fantastic aspect now that there's so much support for gender in this work. So it's a 3-component program. The first is particularly supporting local economic development around natural resources, so particularly supply chain for natural resource activities in natural resource communities. Second component is local economic development related to other industries in those communities, so other anchor industries, other local areas to create a more sustainable approach. So we're not just supporting oil, gas, and mining supply chain activities, but a much more diversified local economic development program. And then the third component is capacity building for local partners, including local government, that's going to support this whole program. So it's Ghana, Guinea, Kenya, and Cote d'Ivoire. We are just at the beginning of this program. For each country, we've done gender assessments, looking at sort of national and regional issues, and looking at what is keeping women from participating in the supply chain. What are what's going well? Where are women engaged? What is keeping them out of the supply chain? What levers could we push? Where could they be more engaged, but there are certain factors keeping them out of it? Where are they not yet engaged, but with the right support, we could be helping them engage either in natural resource supply chain or more broadly. And this is one thing that I think is really quite innovative about this program, is that it recognizes this inclusive approach that is required, and we have a lot of flexibility to develop programs that target different aspects of different barriers that may be precluding women from engaging in the supply chain. So in terms of component 1, in terms of this natural resource supply chain, we're developing a supplier portal in Guinea. Can I ask whoever is typing to maybe go on? Yeah. A supplier portal in Guinea that's connecting suppliers with natural resource company opportunities, and it's also going to be a host for capacity building for training and resources. And there's going to be a particular focus there on reaching out to women-owned and women-led SMEs. We're doing local content trainings. We're training on the toolkit itself. We're reviewing communication of procurement information, how that's reaching local communities, particularly women-owned businesses, and how communities are accessing information. And we'll also be looking at how we can work on the demand side as well, working with companies on procurement policies as well. In terms of component 2, so this broader aspect of supply chain development, not just related to natural resources, we're doing capacity building, for instance, in Ghana, doing training on fisheries and fish smoking. In Kenya, we're doing an innovative program with female solar entrepreneurs. And then to sort of support that, the broader capacity building, we're doing, for instance, local government training in Ghana, sensitization of community leaders, training on leadership, advocacy, financial literacy for leaders of women and youth groups. So more of a holistic, whole and enabling environment sort of capacity building. Adriana, do you want to jump in there?
Yes, I just wanted to bring a few examples of partnerships, because I think partnerships are very, very important. IFC recently signed a partnership with We Connect to basically work on increasing the number of companies that source from women-owned businesses. We Connect is the leading global organization helping women-owned businesses to succeed in global value chains, and their membership represents over 1 trillion in annual purchasing power. And so we are working with We Connect now and doing in every region, looking for companies and working with the companies, our clients, to basically help them to provide to be increase their sourcing from women suppliers and representatives. ExxonMobil in the past invested about 80 million in programs to improve women economic potential in over 90 countries. And the focus of this program provided women focused skills training and mentoring, identify investments to help guide interventions to help guide smart investments. And also, they were helping implementing technology to accelerate women economic opportunities. And in 2014, they also partnership with We Connect, and they organized a 4 days Meet the Buyer program workshop, which was attended by 300 women. And basically, the workshops bridge the gap between the local women-owned businesses with the global supply chain to better understand how to connect, how to interact, and how to do business with large-scale companies, particularly with large-scale oil, gas, and mining companies. And as a result of this 4 days workshop, 2 companies from Nigeria secured contracts with Exxon. When one of the areas which we think it's very much explored is basically supporting micro businesses to develop in SMEs and or larger businesses. And we've seen a lot of work being done by the industry in supporting micro interventions, mostly led by women, and help them to basically develop into a business that then provided support, was integrated in their supply chain. And some examples that come into my mind are like the women producing uniforms for the mining company in Pogra in Papua New Guinea. In Lihir, women associations were given the management of the local market, and that not only that supported and brought more revenues to the group, but also gave the members of the association the opportunity to sell, learn how to grow vegetables and sell them in the market. The other examples I have in my mind is also from one of the mining companies in Ghana. They basically started focusing on supporting the micro businesses led by women into the communities around their operations, and they basically created through these programs opportunities for the women to increase the pool of eligible SMEs. And they deliberately target women-owned or led businesses. They launch challenges for innovation for women, and they hire female staff to be women enterprise champions to liaison with the women-owned firms and become mentors. And they establish also targets to raise the budget for procurement from women-owned businesses. Another company in Papua New Guinea, through the gender desk, the gender relationship officer help a women small business to basically get a loan and buy a truck, and gave them the opportunity to provide services with a truck to the company, and that helped them to increase the number of trucks that are serving not only that particular company but also the other ones in the region. When talking about local content, we also consider the skills development, not only the involvement of women-led businesses in providing goods and services, but also how to build the women's skills, particularly on the technical skills to become employees. And I've seen partnerships of the companies with the universities to attract more women in technical studies, and even putting in place a campaign to make sure that the cultural barriers that wouldn't allow women to work for a mine or will stigmatize women working in the mining sector, it's demystified and understand by the people. And in Mozambique, initially the company, one of the companies we work with, was looking at putting in place like livelihood programs, helping small farmers and families to basically bring new. It was a horticulture project, new vegetables and also collecting, growing chickens and collecting eggs to provide for the company. But then they basically decided that it's much better to support these families and help build them like small businesses and connect them to the market. So they used the local supplier development program to train the women and basically help them to set up the businesses and help them to connect to the market. So these are a few examples of what the industry is doing right now. Things are happening basically as a reactive or not in a very systematic way. And in this, basically the toolkit we put together, we hope that in the future will help our clients and beyond our clients to have a more systematic approach to that.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thanks so much. I'm probably going to allow time now for BHP to speak, but really appreciate the backdrop, also in terms of the business case, some really some worrisome stats there, but also some positive space for opportunity, and the practical examples of supplier development opportunities are the kinds of things that I think take some of these concepts in the abstract into tangible things that companies can grab to. So I'm going to shift over now to BHP, to Fiona and Mia. Can you just share your screen, Fiona? Fiona, maybe you're muted perhaps?
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, it may be a little closer to the mic would be good.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I think you might have had me on mute at your end.
Okay.
So hi everybody, and thanks so much, Jeff, for inviting us to be part of this call today. I might just do quick introductions of myself and then hand over to Mia before we start our presentation, just so that you know who we are. My role is to work in BHP's head office in Melbourne, leading the Inclusion and Diversity program. I've been with the company for 2 years, and prior to this I had a similar role at a bank, one of the major banks in Australia. Mia, I might hand over to you to just introduce yourself and your role.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity to join and participate in this awesome webinar. My name is Mia Goos. I'm the General Manager for the Spence operation, which is part of the Pampa Norte asset of the copper operations that BHP has in Chile. I've been working in the mining industry now for about 25 years. I was born in South Africa. I worked in the mining industry there, as well as in Europe. And for the last 9 years, I've now been working in Chile in mining. And I've been with BHP now for about 3 years.
Great. Thanks so much, Mia. So Mia and I are going to spend around about 15 minutes just talking to you a little bit about BHP's approach to this issue of inclusion and diversity. And then we're very happy to take questions in the remaining period of time. So I'll commence by, I guess, giving you a little bit of background and a bit of context about why we announced our goal back in 2016 to achieve gender balance in our workforce by 2025. I guess really the clear and compelling reason for doing this was the business case, which was mentioned, Katie, in your presentation. But our CEO, Andrew McKenzie, I guess has a very strong belief that a gender-balanced organisation makes complete sense and is the right thing to do from an economic participation perspective for women. But he also believes very strongly that it's a key driver of the business strategy and of unlocking the value of the incredible assets that BHP has around the world. And so actually a lot of workforce modelling was done to really work out what the goal should be, or actually really more like it was when could we achieve the goal, because Andrew McKenzie was adamant it would be gender balanced. He was not prepared to bake in any kind of compromise. It was never going to be 30% women or 40% women. It had to be balanced. The question was by when. And so modelling was done to work out what was possible, and the date of 2025 was set as our aspirational goal. A global inclusion and diversity council was established, which is in place still to this day and is chaired by the CEO, and is made up of operational leaders from around the company, including Mia and other leaders from around the organisation who help to inform the work and to ensure that it is disseminated to the very fingertips of the organisation. The way that we measure ourselves, which I think is a really important part of this conversation, is through KPIs. So in order to achieve a gender-balanced workforce by 2025, we know that we need to increase the number of women in the company by at least 3% every year. So at a minimum, we have to increase by 3% every year, and that is the KPI that the executive leadership team hold, and they are measured on that as part of their scorecard. We also have a KPI around our inclusion index, because we know that diversity is only one part of this story. It's one thing to hire a diverse workforce. You then have to create an inclusive culture where they can thrive, where they want to work, and where they can develop and grow. So we measure the inclusion index through our annual staff survey, and we have a goal to increase that every year as well, and that is just as important. So that data gets reported on monthly to the executive leadership team. Every quarter, we have a conversation with them to give them an update on progress and to flag any areas of concern and to highlight areas of good results. And every year there is an update to the board. So it's a very comprehensive reporting and tracking framework that we have, because we know that, like other performance metrics such as production and safety, if we don't focus on it every month, it will not be prioritised like those other things are. I guess in terms of progress, and I'll talk about this at the global level, and then I'll hand over to Mia to talk about what she's seen happen in Chile. So we've increased the number of women in the company by 4.8% in the first 2 years of the goal. So we didn't meet our 6% target. You'll remember that I said we needed to get at least 3% every year. It was always very tough to get to achieve that, and we didn't quite achieve it. But that does not in any way slow us down in terms of our commitment to the target. I think it's probably just a reflection of how challenging it is. However, we now have 22.4% of our workforce are women, which is significantly higher than the global industry average of around about 17%. To put that into real numbers, we now have 2,000 more women in our company than we did 2.5 years ago. And that is extraordinary in terms of a shift. So we've gone from around about 5,000 women in our company to 7,000 women approximately. And, one of the big drivers of that has been balancing our external hiring. So when we did our workforce modelling, we uncovered that the only way that we were going to achieve our target was if we made sure that all of our external hiring was balanced, so 50% men, 50% women. And we also needed to make sure that turnover or staff attrition was also gender balanced. Because if we're losing women faster than we're losing men at a proportionate rate, then that is also going to make it very difficult for us to achieve our goal. So we've certainly made great progress on external hiring. When it comes to turnover, we do still have some challenges with there being higher female turnover than male turnover. And we know that that is a big measure and a big barometer of inclusion, because when you have a proportion of your workforce that are leaving your company at a higher rate than the majority group, that is a pretty good sign that your culture is not inclusive. So that is an area that we are really focusing on, and I'll talk more about. And then finally, when it comes to leadership, we now have 121 more female leaders in our company than we did 2.5 years ago. And we're sitting at around about 20% female leadership, and we have an aspiration to increase that significantly, of course, as well. So I guess that's a bit of context from the global perspective. Mia, I might hand to you now just to talk about your perspective from Chile.
Thanks, Fiona. Yes, in Chile, I think culturally the mining industry has been more male-orientated. And if you look at the average inclusion rate of women in mining in Chile, it's only about 8%. However, across the 3 operations that BHP has in Chile, which is the Escondida, the Spence, and the Cerro Colorado operations, we are averaging at this stage in the operations, excluding the HR functions, the finance, which are typically easier to get female participation. Just in our hardcore operations in mining, we are averaging about 16%, which is double that of the average of the country. And on our leadership participation, we've got 14%. So we've made big strides in increasing at about 3% a year here in Chile. And we've also used some really great opportunities that came our way to achieve that. For example, at our Spence operation, we have an existing operation. And we are currently recruiting for a new plant that we are in construction. So while we're constructing this new plant, looking at the 200 odd workers that we are going to recruit for working at that operation, we've said from the beginning, we are going to go at this 50-50. So what we've done is we've opened these opportunities for our existing crews, which were mainly men, to go and be developed to go and work at this new technology, new plant that we are busy building. So that gave development opportunities to many of the men, and where they then left gaps in the current organization, we filled that with a lot of female apprentices that had shadowed these men while they were in the recruitment process for the plant that we're building next door. And together then, with the new recruits that we're getting in for the new plant that we're building, which we also said will be 50-50, we've managed to really increase the amount of female participation, not only at the new site, but at the older site as well, giving opportunities of development for not only the females that we are giving opportunities to, but also to a lot of the men that is now learning a new skill by moving from a leaching plant over to a concentration plant. So that has created a really good vibe and good feeling for our operation with regards to the inclusion.
Great. Thanks, Mia. That's such a great practical story of how it's coming to life in our business. What we'd like to move on to now is really, I guess, Mia and I have talked a little bit about some of the results that we've achieved, and we still have a long way to go. But what we want to share with you now is what are the strategies that we are rolling out across the company to help us achieve those results, because we know that we need to drive systemic change. Katie, this is something that you spoke about in your presentation. It's not enough just to have a target. You've actually got to change the fundamental operations of the business. So there's really 4 main areas that we've identified that underpin our strategy, and you can see them on the screen here. So embedding flexible working to normalise shared caring and people having more choice about how they work is a key priority for us, as is mitigating bias, both in terms of processes but also in behaviour and attitudes. Ensuring our brand is attractive to a whole new talent pool out there in the world, as well as working very closely with our suppliers. So what we'll do now is Mia and I will take it in turns to talk to you about each of those sections. So Mia, I'll hand back to you now to talk about embedding flexible working.
Okay, good, thanks. If we look at flexible work, I think the main thing that, Fiona, if you can go to the next slide, to the flex slide. I think the main thing was that many people said flexible work can't be done in the operation. But they are wrong, because we are implementing it, and it has already been implemented in certain ways in our operations, and it is working really good for us. We are implementing at this stage different types of flex work, different flexible rosters for different roles that we have. So we've got a range of different options that people can opt for pending what role they have in our organization, which includes roster changes. So people can say, I want to only work day shift, and they agree with somebody who maybe only wants to work night shift. So instead of being forced to work day and night, they can agree between themselves and see what their setups are at home to either just work day shift or just work night shift, or change shifts as their needs can be. We're looking at job sharing. We're including sabbatical leaves. We've got remote work from your home or from the head office in Santiago, which is about 2 hours by plane away from most of the operations. We've got medical leave that we give to people, and we've got flexible work hours. And by having this as a standard set of options, which we are implementing in the exact same way across our 3 operations, we have opened up so many possibilities for people who maybe previously couldn't join our operation working remotely away from their families. So this has not only opened doors for female, it's also opened doors for people with disabilities and many men that also have to have a role of taking care of family at home as well. So not only by doing this flexible work rosters have we managed to open our doors for more female participation, we've also coupled that with a lot of technology innovation and increases. And we are currently building in our head office in Santiago control rooms from which we will be operating our operations from the city and not having to have fly in, fly out. So a lot of the operations are going to be operated from Santiago and not from the remote locations on site. And together that, coupled with these flexible options, we have opened our doors for people to be more participative. And that is helping us create a culture of confidence, because we're saying, I don't need to see you at work, working for 8 to 12 hours, sitting behind your desk. You are going to be managed on your outputs and on your results. And we are going to agree on a flexible work roster which suits both the manager and the employee, so that we can meet each other halfway in an ambience of confidence. And then people are so much more committed to the end result, because they can feel that the company has met them halfway with regards to their personal situation as well. So by doing these flexible works, we are building inclusive teams. The male employees love the flex work rosters equally as much as the women. And together we are working with regards to trust and care to make sure we can be the benchmark operation that we want to be.
Yeah, thanks, Mia. And I guess if I just give a quick global flavour of that, what we now know is that 46% of our people are working flexibly since we announced our aspirational goal 2 years ago. And of that, 70% of them are men. So I think of all the things that we've done on inclusion and diversity to engage men, this has probably been the most impactful. We know that in our industry, sometimes it's quite difficult for men. They don't see enough of their families and they don't feel they have a lot of choice over that. And so when we introduced this notion of flexible working, it really has been quite life-changing and has been extremely well received by men. And I think to really validate Mia's comment that, you know, you can do flexible working in an operational context, 36% of people who work in production roles say they're working flexibly in our company, and 32% of those in maintenance roles. And the other important thing is that half of our people leaders are working flexibly. And we know that that's really important, because role modelling of this is critical. If you have a culture of presenteeism or a culture where people may be fearful about working flexibly, they're probably not going to do it unless they see their manager doing it. So this has been a very impactful culture change program for us, as well as a very important way for us to achieve our gender balance goals. I might move on to the next topic, which I'm going to quickly cover, which is really about mitigating bias. And this is, I guess, this whole idea that bias is everywhere. We know that it's a thing, but you have to actually take action in order to try to interrupt it. And we look at this in two ways. Firstly, it's in our processes. So we look at those important processes where those moments that really matter in terms of recruitment, in terms of how pay is determined, and in terms of how equipment is designed. Because actually what we discovered was that once we started putting women into our operational teams, sometimes the physicality of the work, the design of the equipment was not safe, it was not comfortable, and it was not conducive to women operating in a way that was effective. Maybe they were expected to lift heavy things, maybe to climb up onto steps that were too high. And so we've made literally hundreds of small improvements across the business to enable women to comfortably and safely operate in our workplace. And actually what we've found is that it's made things better for the men as well. Often in our industry, men don't feel like they can say, oh, I don't want to do that, or I can't do that, because it's a very masculine culture. Whereas once a woman comes into the environment, it's kind of a bit obvious that it has to be attended to. And I think another category I would talk about is personal sanitation. You know, when you've only got men working out in a mine site, maybe there's not as much attention paid to appropriate bathroom facilities. But once you have women there, then you really need to do something about that, which actually makes it better for everybody. So we've done significant work there. I do want to mention very briefly our gender pay gap review, because that is a very important part of us measuring our impact. We have a global gender pay review, and if you Google BHP's approach to gender pay gap, you can find more information. But the headlines of that is that in FY17, we made 100 pay adjustments to the value of $400,000. And then in FY18, we made 1,000 pay adjustments to the value of $4 million. And the reason that that number increased so dramatically was A, because of a robust process that was integrated into our annual reward cycle, but secondly, because of a complete mindset shift in leaders, that they were empowered to and expected to close these pay gaps where they existed. That our default position is, if there's a pay gap for a woman, close it, unless there's a good reason for not closing it. And that has made a significant impact. I also just want to touch briefly on this notion of bias in behaviour. And this is a real challenge for us in our industry, I think, where sometimes the culture is very masculine and cannot not always be respectful, particularly towards women. And we found that out because when we investigated why our female turnover was higher than male turnover, but women told us it was because of what they described as these micro behaviours or this borderline behaviour, which is not out-and-out harassment, although sometimes it was, but actually it was more this everyday sexism and disrespect and very masculine culture. And so in order to address that, we've developed a company-wide campaign that will run over many years talking about respect and the fact that we have to lift the standard of what is acceptable, that maybe the way that people behaved or the things they said in the past that were okay, well, they're not okay anymore. And it's not okay to make comments about someone or to be rude to somebody or to bully and harass somebody. And, of course, that goes beyond gender. So that is something that we stand for very strongly, and we hope over time will be the thing that will address our issue with higher female turnover than we would like. I'll move on now because I'm consciously going to run a little bit short of time. So I'm going to hand back to Mia now to talk about our third plank of our strategy, which is about brand.
Thanks, Fiona. Yes, I think we're branding BHP very much as an inclusive and diverse organization that we want to be. It's a strong theme for us. It's one of our values. We have a charter of values, and our inclusion and diversity is one of those values. So we're branding our company as the place where you can come and feel included as a diverse team. And we brand our company as that this diversity is making us more successful. We have got many campaigns. I think you've all seen the LinkedIn campaigns, the Facebook campaigns, the communications. We've got leaders speaking about this bold goal that we have of 50-50 by 2025 in every opportunity that we can get. But I think there's no better branding campaign that we have going than our own employees, because they go home and they tell their family, their friends, I get an equal pay. I can work flexible. I can work from Santiago on a mine in Chile. I am included. I have development plans. And by our own employees taking this message out, we just feel that by doing it and by people believing it and living it, it's such a more powerful message. And they put on the social networks their own stories because they have felt it, they have lived it. And that's what's giving us that advantage. It's not that we're paying lip service to this value that we have. We are living it, and our people are declaring how they are experiencing it. And a small example is that before we did our wage negotiations with the unions last year, the union came and said, we are only our union directors are only male. So we've got this big female workforce that we also need to represent. Can we include another person for the wage negotiations that's female? And we said, by all means. So we had a vote amongst them with regards to which female representative they wanted to include, and we included her into our negotiations. So we're really living our value, and by doing that, our own people are doing the branding for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mia. And finally, the fourth and final pillar of our strategy is working with suppliers, and this is obviously a big part of the toolkit that we heard about earlier in the presentation. This really has sort of three planks for us. The first is obviously our contractors. So we have a significant proportion of the BHP workforce is labour hire, and so we work very closely with those supply partners who employ our labour hire contractors to ensure that they share our ambition and that we're learning together about how to create inclusive workplaces and how to tap into a wider talent pool. The second part of this area of focus is with the suppliers that we work with who build the big equipment and the gear that we use on our sites. So we've partnered with the OEMs such as Caterpillar and Liebherr and so on to really workshop with them how can the design of this plant, the fixed plant as well as the mobile equipment, be more accessible, more comfortable. And, you know, we started that conversation with them 2 years ago, and it was the first time that they'd been engaged in that conversation. So they're learning on this journey with us, and we are doing research with universities around the world to really think about how can we make significant changes to design of equipment to ensure men and women of all shapes and sizes can operate. And then thirdly, it's about all of the other supply partners that we work with, whether they be management consultancy firms, law firms, anyone that we partner with, we need to know that they share our understanding and commitment to gender balance. So when we have a management consulting team that comes into BHP that does not send a gender balanced team in to do work with us, we will question that and say we would much prefer to see you sending a gender balanced team. And we also want them to incorporate these notions of inclusion and diversity into the work that they do with us, because, you know, more and more we're teams of teams and we're working very collaboratively with external partners. So the supply chain area of focus is enormous for us, and Mia and I could probably spend a whole hour just talking about that. But I'm very conscious that we are, you know, we're starting to use up quite a lot of the time. So I wonder, Jess, if maybe that might be a good point to kind of finish this formal part and throw now to you for questions where Mia and I can potentially fill in some of these gaps.
Great. No, I think it's a fantastic idea, and I mean that's as good as it gets for our webinar content. So it was kind of okay to let you run a little longer than normal because it was just such an exciting goal that you're pursuing, but also some of the details and how you're doing that, and particularly I like the point on making sure that, you know, partners and management consultants who are coming in are also meeting your goals. So we will open it up now to Q&A. We've got a few questions in the chat, but I'll first allow people to ask questions to both the IFC and BHP teams. And just note you'll have to unmute yourself to make that work first, and then we'll go from there. Isabella, are people able to unmute themselves? Just to double check. In the meantime, I'll go to the chat.
Yeah, they should be able to.
Okay.
Hi, Beverly here. I actually have a question for the BHP team. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Thanks so much both to IFC and BHP for your presentations. They were super interesting. So my question, BHP team, is could you talk a little bit about either internal policy or external policy that has helped to drive your approach? Like, I'm just curious to see what prompted this approach by BHP to really focus on, in very concrete ways, on increasing gender inclusion. And then the second question was, actually, I'll let you answer that one first and then I can come back. Quick second question.
Sure, no problem. Look, I mean, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, really the catalyst for this was the CEO, Andrew McKenzie in particular, being very clear that working in an organisation that had 17% women was not right. I mean, it's illogical and irrational when you've got, you know, a population that's 50-50 out there in the world. It makes no sense. And it's not a good use of the talent pool that's available to only have 17% women, combined with his complete belief that a more inclusive organisation would make us a better organisation. So really, I guess my answer to you would be you can have all the policies in the world, and actually we haven't created any new policies. All of our policies that we use around part-time and job share and parental leave, they were all existing policies. But the thing that has really accelerated our efforts and our focus is leadership.
Interesting. So my immediate, very quick second question was, what kind of feedback or take-up have you had from other companies as they hear about what you're doing? Do you? I assume you speak more broadly within the industry about what the approach that you've taken.
Sure. I mean, I'll ask Mia to comment on this in terms of what she's seen in Chile. But what I would say globally is, look, certainly there's a lot of interest from our sector. I think there was a lot of interest as well as potentially some disbelief and scepticism as well from some of what I would say are majority male CEOs who were concerned that this was not possible, that it could not be done safely or sustainably, and that actually BHP were really barking up the wrong tree, to use an Australian expression. But having said that, there is also a lot of genuine interest and desire to learn from us and to go on that journey with us. Mia, did you want to add to that in terms of what you've seen in Chile?
Yeah, I think the fact that the biggest mining company in the world has put out this goal and is really driving it has put a lot of pressure on some other companies to go and review, are we going to do this as well? And it has, I think, pushed some of them that were like on the border of, are we going to go for this or are we not, into that zone of, yes, this is the right thing to do and we are also going to do this. A lot of the other companies have also made some promises with regards to a certain percentage, and we've even found that some of the state-owned companies here in Chile has also really upped their drive with regards to inclusion, and they're also starting to brand their company as a company where women can come and work, and they're opening the doors that's been so shut for such a long time. And I also just want to come back to your first question as well, Beverly. I think we don't have that many policies, but as Fiona mentioned, we have our key performance indicators. And each of us as leaders have these performance indicators with regards to which we are measured. So I will be measured with regards to my operations, diversity and inclusion, KPI results. So if I don't grow with my 3% each year, I will be questioned with regards to why don't I? If my inclusion result in my employee perception survey does not come out good, then I will be questioned with regards to why did it not come out good and what are you going to be doing with regards to improving this? So although we don't have the policies and procedures, we are measured against it, and we do it not because we just want to comply. We do it because we have seen with this growth of 3% each year, it's really changed the cultures in which we work in our operations. And I don't think anybody wants to go back. We just want to go forward.
Great.
Yeah, if I can echoing the response from Mia and Fiona, what we see, this is Adriana from IFC, what we see happening in the industry is that indeed there is a big interest of most of the companies and particularly in the mining sector, more than in the oil and gas sector, to address the gender issues, to increase the number of women in the workforce and so on. We also see that where the CEO is pushing and promoting this, it's working very well. So for us, it's very important to have somebody at the top basically being convinced on the business case and helping basically mainstream gender into the company's operation. And we really congratulate BHP of putting targets, because the other companies are not so willing to put targets, and we believe that even the targets are not met, you will be still the lead in this space, and you will show that having a very proactive and deliberate approach on increasing opportunities for women in the workforce, it works. And Jeff, if I am allowed to ask 2 questions for BHP.
Of course.
One is mostly addressed to you, Fiona. You mentioned that you're not able to meet the annual targets, and I'm very interested to find out on why, what were the challenges. And also you mentioned that staff retention, women retention, it's hard, and wondering why it's happening and what do you do to improve that?
Yeah, great. Thank you. That's a great question. I guess the questions are actually completely related. The thing that has stopped us from achieving a 3% increase both years has been higher female turnover. So if you just do the simple maths, there's only 2 levers that you can pull to increase the number of women in your company. You have to hire more and you have to keep them. And so whilst we've hired a lot more women than we ever have before, we've hired more women in the last 2 years than we have in the last 20 years at BHP. We lose them at a higher rate than we lose men. It's a crude term, but it's like it's a leaky bucket, you know, and that's going to stop us from achieving the goal. And that has been the handbrake on our progress. And to your second part of your question is why is that happening? Well, this is what I was saying earlier about how it's a good measure of how inclusive the culture is, because when we went and asked people, women and men as well, why did they think women were leaving the company at a higher rate than men? Across our entire operations in every country, in both professional jobs as well as in the operations roles, there was 2 reasons that came through. The first was flexible working was still not yet fully embedded. And the reality is that in every country we operate, women are still doing most of the caring and most of the family responsibilities. And so whilst we've made great strides on flexible working, it's still not quite enough for some women to be able to maintain their careers with us. And then the second reason that was cited was what I called before this borderline behaviour or this disrespectful culture that over time just made it an environment that these women didn't want to be in. So I guess doing that analysis, doing that inquiry with our people really validated for us that flexible working is absolutely probably one of the most important things that we can do. It's a game changer in terms of culture change as well as preparing for the future of work. But then it really drove us to create this respectful behaviour campaign, which we're halfway through and we've got still a long way to go. And really what we're doing is setting that expectation that we need to treat everybody with respect. And I saw that someone on the chat asked a question about LGBTI, about whether we have targets for example, for gay, transgender people, etc. We don't specifically have targets, but in our respectful behaviour campaign, we have a wide range of scenarios that we talk to our people about, not just about women being disrespected, but also about homophobia, about racism, and about other forms of disrespectful behaviour. So those are the sort of the key drivers of why we didn't achieve our target and what we're doing to try to turn that around.
Adriana, if I can also say that I think that's the scenario if you look at the global BHP, but we also have some pockets of excellence where we've grown more than our 3% a year. For example, our operation here, we've got high inclusive culture. We've come out really good on our inclusion index, and we've actually seen that the voluntary turnover rate of females have come down, and it's even at this stage in some of our operations that's got an extremely high inclusion rate, lower than that of the men. So they are all interlinked, and we're working at all fronts to get them into a balance. And as Fiona said, we believe that the big flex time implementation that we're now going to be doing in the operations itself, not only at our head office, is going to bring us that extra bit that we are going to need to make our goal.
Great.
If I may, my name is
Sorry, Savannah.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. I'll ask my question later, Jess.
Thank you. So my name is Alexandra Minko. I'm working with the IFC on local content development in Guinea. And I would like to thank everyone for the very interesting presentations and ask a question to the BHP team. I wanted to go back to the supplier aspect of your presentation and ask you about the world-class supplier development program that you've innovated with basically in the industry, and ask you if you can give us some angles from the gender results of the program. Thank you.
Sure. Look, let me try and answer that. I guess there's sort of two things that we've done, and I'm hoping I'm on the right track with your question. I think you're asking me what are some of the particular things we've done to improve gender balance through our suppliers. The first is that we've set targets, incentive-based targets with our labour hire partners to incentivise them for increasing the the female representation of the crews that they send to work on our operations. So rather than going with a penalty-based system, we've gone with an incentive-based system, and that is proving to be very effective. In terms of the OEMs or the equipment manufacturers, really it is about working together to build capability, and obviously in some of these big pieces of equipment it takes many years sometimes to design new equipment and to commission it and have it into the operations. So this is a longer piece of strategy, but we are operating at multiple levels on the ground with local suppliers right through to our CEO's involvement on ICMM around how we can influence at every level possible to get people thinking differently, to go and ask women what it's like for them to try and work on their equipment, and to build those things into specs and into contracts and into the way that we work. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. It also, I think that your answer is also broader actually than my question, because I was referring to the first part of your answer and specifically the incentives to work with women-owned businesses. So that was what I was interested in.
Now I understand. Thank you for clarifying that. And of course, we also have a big strategy to do the same with Indigenous businesses owned by Indigenous peoples in the countries in which we operate as well. I think we still have some way to go, if I can be completely transparent there, on women-operated procurement opportunities. That has not been a big area of focus for us in the early stages of our strategy, but I would see that changing, and I was very interested to hear the earlier comments from the team, the IFC team, about that. But we do a lot of work with Indigenous and First Nations people to ensure procurement through them, and I think we can apply those learnings to women-operated businesses as well.
Thank you.
I think we must also consider that if I look in the South American culture, a lot of the entrepreneurs that start their own businesses that then support the mining industry are people that come from the mining industry. So if we don't have females that have grown up in the mining industry, that have got these networks of contacts and support and knowledge, it's very difficult for them to go and start their own businesses. So I think the first big step for us is that we are growing our entrepreneurs of the future by giving them the opportunities to work in the mining and extractive industry at this stage, to gain that knowledge and that confidence within the business realm, so that they can actually, equal to what the men do, go out and start their own businesses, and they can be rehired to come and give us services in our operation.
Great. So then I'll turn it over to you in 1 second. Maybe Fiona and Mia, if there's a question in the chat that you can take a look at in the meantime, from Sinbin Kim at GIZ. So Silvana?
Yes, hi, my name is Silvana. I am the program leader of the extractive-led local economic diversification program at the World Bank. Thanks for your presentation to both teams. I have a couple of questions. One regarding the disrespectful behavior that Fiona, you were talking about, and I was wondering whether in your analysis you have noted whether the bias is linked to the level of education of the workers or a cultural bias by country, or perhaps an age-related behavior. And the second question is on the innovative design and your work with the OEM suppliers, and what is the incentive for them to actually work for you? Is that the sheer amount of your purchase from them, or are you co-developing this innovative design or redesign of equipment with them?
Yeah, okay, great, thank you. I might take the second question first. It is pretty much just our sheer buying power, I think, if I can say that. Yeah, we're obviously, BHP are a big player, and we have influence, and we're very aware of that comes responsibility as well. And so we have found that the suppliers, these big global companies, have been incredibly engaged in this conversation. It has not been difficult to bring them to the table, and it's very much through collaboration. I think we have an attitude that it's not going to be helpful for us to just tell people we want gender balance to everything and you need to go and do it, and if you don't, we won't do business with you. Like, that's not our way of doing things, because we're all learning. We are learning as well, and so we're very much about taking others with us and learning together. When it comes to your question, I think you were asking me about sexual harassment and whether there is any particular nuances in different cultures and different countries. I'm hoping someone might nod and say, yes, that was the question.
Well, not necessarily sexual harassment, but bias against women working in the mine operations.
Sure, thank you. Well, look, I think there's a spectrum, and unfortunately there is an element of sexual harassment that we are conscious of around how women are thought of and treated in our operations. Look, I think the reality is that it is a very masculine work setting. It's often people are working away from home in difficult and challenging circumstances, often on repetitive, monotonous tasks in homogenous teams. And all of these things create a heightened level of risk, particularly for women, of either what I would call low-level disrespectful behaviour right through to very serious sexual harassment. And so we're very conscious of that, and we are really, I think there's a concept that all mining organisations need to start to think about, which is that risk assessments need to be gendered, because women are less safe in this context than men. And so that's the approach that we are taking. We're thinking about this through a safety lens, because this is a form of obviously psychological safety. Our industry is more at risk of this than others. And we are, our approach is really to talk about this with our teams, to have uncomfortable conversations. There are some cultural aspects which Mia can talk to in Chile, around superstitions and things like that. But even here in Australia, there are some parts of our country that are not very progressive about the roles of men and women in society and what women should and should not be doing. So this is a culture change that goes beyond our organisation and goes out into the world more broadly.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I don't mean to interject, but just because we're actually coming up to the end of the webinar, so I might ask Fiona if you could quickly answer the question in the chat. That would be great, and then we'll wrap up after. So sorry, we have just so much good discussion, but we'll have to wrap it up somewhere. So.
Oh. And I think Mia is going to pick up the question in the chat. So I'm going to go over to her.
Sorry, I couldn't see the question in the chat. Can you just repeat it for me?
Yeah, I think there's a
bias as well.
There's actually a question here about the KPIs and whether or not these are at the job level and job family level in terms of how they're interpreted. I think I'm happy just to quickly answer that. Okay. We are definitely conscious of the fact that we need to not just achieve 3% at the aggregate level, because diversity needs to be in every team. And there are some jobs that are particularly challenging, for example, maintenance and trades, as well as engineering and other things. So our overall goal is to achieve 3%, but we do our analysis and we track our progress and our trends at job levels by different operations, and most importantly in job families.
And it's across the operations in each department. So the average must be 3% a year. But if one of the departments, as Fiona said, don't grow with their 3% a year, that manager of that department needs to answer to the general manager with regards to why did they not contribute to achieving the goal. So it's very much down to all levels of the organization in each and every department that we work across.
Okay, fantastic. I'm sorry we don't have any more time, but we should respect everybody's hard stop at, I guess it's 9:30 here in Toronto and DC. And I'll throw it to Savannah if you have any final comments too. But in the meantime, this actually has been our biggest webinar yet. We kind of thought it might be, and that's even with a bit of an early time start. So we had about 60 people on this at one point. So really thrilled to have the success of this webinar, but also to hear from all this insight. I'll add really quickly that for those who are not currently a member of the Extractives-led Local Economic Diversification Community of Practice, if you could reach out to us, we can make sure you're added to our list, which is an online platform, but also compiles sort of the world's local content, policy development news, and company news. Every month we send one of those newsletters out. So I'll leave it there. We'll be looking to have another webinar probably in April at this rate. And thanks for all your participation. I don't know if you have anything to add, Savannah, there in Washington.
No, just thanking everyone for the wonderful discussion. Very interesting. Of course, 1 hour doesn't really make justice to the topic. We will be summarizing this discussion and posting online on the Community of Practice, and as usual, we invite members to intervene and do follow-up discussions, and if there are other questions to address to the speakers, we will be very happy to convey them.
Great. Okay, thanks so much, everybody. We really appreciate everybody taking part, and thank you again to IFC and BHP for all your amazing work and sharing it today.
Pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.